Are barefoot shoes worth the hype? Well, it really depends on who you're asking, because there's the camp that says, yes, absolutely, life-changing, wouldn't wear anything else. And then there's the camp that says, no, they're just a gimmick. So if I had a hat on, I'd throw it in the ring and give you my perspective, as I firmly believe that barefoot shoes, specifically Vivo barefoot shoes, have added a huge amount of value to my experience as a hybrid athlete and my life in general. They do arrive cleaner than these ones, it must be said. So let's rewind to my post-rugby playing days, where I was very strength training dominant for 4 or 5 years, competing all over the world in powerlifting. And part of that was looking for some footwear that had the least amount of interference between my foot and the floor, so that there was no additional range of motion. I had a stable base, I could really screw myself into the floor and be rigid from the ground upwards. That was where I found VivoBarefoot, and I got myself a pair for lifting, and I got myself a pair for walking around. However, once I'd bought in, I quickly found myself caught between the two camps that I've already mentioned in the introduction, and it left me feeling a bit confused in terms of what I should consider, how I should approach things, and whether actually I'd made the right decision in buying them at all. So in early 2020, I committed to wearing Vivos on a pretty regular basis, and I'll talk you through how the first 100 days felt a little bit later on. But initial impressions were that this is a little bit different, which forced me to ask a few questions as to why, what were the benefits, what were the things to consider, were there any risks? And to be quite honest, I was just thrilled that I could put myself into this category without wearing gloves on my feet. So why do I believe that VivoBarefoot are the best option? Well, ultimately, they've been in the market the longest, they've gone through the most iterations, they have the widest range, and they appeal to the most markets and are supplied in the most markets worldwide. So in terms of accessibility, they give you a really, really good entry point into barefoot footwear. Their sustainability credentials are also world-class, and let me clear up my bias from this point onwards. My last full-time job that wasn't for myself was actually in the marketing department at Vivo. So whilst I admit at this point you might be thinking about clicking off because of bias, I've always been very, very nuanced and considered in terms of how this narrative sits, because I don't believe in the camp that thinks you should be wearing them all the time, but I also don't believe in the camp that thinks that they're a gimmick. I very much sit somewhere in the middle, and I believe that my time at Vivo gives me more of a commercial understanding, more of a marketing understanding, more of a practical understanding, and more of a nuanced understanding of what actually goes into making the shoes the way that they are made, which I can hopefully divulge for you all today. It also means that I've understood the science around the space for quite a while, and part of my job at Vivo was to disseminate that through social media, blog posts, marketing, podcasts, all that sort of stuff. And it means that I've got a good top-down view of what the argument's for, what the argument's against, and what the anecdote really is. So let's just get it out of the way. With this video, you can save yourself 10% off Vivo with the code FergusVivo if you would like to do so, but I really, really want to emphasize that I want this video to come across as a balanced consideration that shares my perspective and how I use the shoes, that's probably somewhere in the middle of those two camps. So as I've already briefly alluded to, I think the range of VivoBarefoot is what makes them the market leaders. It means that you can get all the benefits of wide, thin, and flexible shoes with an open toe box, zero drop, but still have options you can wear with jeans, still have options you can wear in the mountains with grip, still have options you can wear in the gym, and you don't have the negative association of being that guy in a loosely fitting tank top and strangely short shorts that's wearing the 5-finger glove shoes in a Globo gym and making everyone feel very uncomfortable. So my first pair were actually these Magna Trail firm grounds, and I wasn't really sure what to expect when I walked out of the store having collected them, but very quickly I found that it felt quite uncomfortable, quite alien, and very strange underfoot, because my toes could sort of breathe, not a phrase I've used before, but here we are. I could engage with the floor, I could feel my toes working a lot harder, I could feel the balls of my feet, the heels of my feet sort of interacting with the floor. I felt a little bit shorter. My cadence felt like it had increased walking, like I was zooming along, just trying to go at normal walking pace. But it did feel quite grounded, quite natural, quite aligned from the word go. For the first week, my feet were a little bit sore. There was a little bit of stress in my calves as we adjusted to that slightly increased range of motion, which I'll break down in a second. And my FHL, the muscles and tendons and ligaments sort of around my ankle joint and feet were definitely working harder. But week on week, that got better and better as time went on. So I want to really make it clear that if you do give these a go and you come from wearing conventional footwear all the time and don't spend much time barefoot, walking around the house, on beaches, I don't know, I don't spend much time on beaches here in Scotland, but you might over where you are. There are some things to be aware of. It might feel a bit uncomfortable, it might feel a bit alien, but that's all part of the process of adapting. So let's break down the principal differences between conventional footwear and barefoot footwear to contextualize why the first 100 days are the way they are. So here I have some generic sort of day-to-day trainers from Skechers, which I think have an 8mm drop, which means that from this point here to this point here, there is an 8mm downward angle. So you're essentially tilting yourself forwards, tilting your hips forwards and getting that little bit taller from the ground. There's also cushioning. They're also quite rigid, which means that you're not getting much movement from the ground upwards, and you're not getting much feedback proprioceptively from the ground because there's this layer of cushioning. Whereas conversely, if we take Vivo's wide, thin and flexible approach, they're not very rigid. They've got a wider toe box and they're zero drop, which means that rather than being tilted like this, they're flat. So you are much better aligned with the ground, your hips, your knees, up to your shoulders, which does mean that your walking gait will change a little bit. It means that by increasing the range of motion in your Achilles and your calves by about 6 to 8mm, depending on the shoes you're in, you put yourself at risk of overuse, overstrain, and more volume going through that area, which is why it's very important to transition slowly into barefoot shoes. So essentially, the reason my feet felt weak, the reason I felt like my cadence had increased, the reason I felt like my toes could breathe, is because I'd gone from narrow, rigid, and slightly elevated shoes in the form of conventional footwear to open toe boxed, zero drop, flexible shoes, which allowed my feet to do their natural thing and for me to be much more in tune with my movement. But as I've mentioned, with that comes some things that you need to be conscious of, which we'll break down a little bit more later on. So before we go any further, I think it's important to dive into some of the science. And if we refer back to the camps that I referenced in the introduction, we have the be all and end all barefooters and the die hard, it's a gimmick, I'm going to stick to my cushion shoes, thank you very much. And there is supporting evidence for this side and there is supporting evidence for this side. But the overarching scientific narrative is that it is inconclusive. One side is not scientifically better than the other. There is supporting evidence for both sides, and this is where the anecdote and the personal experience that supports both sides becomes very important. And as somebody that dips my toe, pun intended, in both sides for different purposes, I feel I can give a nuanced understanding here. So let's start with a study that came out of Liverpool University in 2021, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of whilst I was in my role at Vivo. So Chris de Oet and the team determined that in just 6 months you can improve your foot strength by up to 60% just by wearing VivoBarefoot shoes on a day-to-day basis. This carried over into some other research around fall prevention, stability and balance in the elderly, which just goes to show that by strengthening the area around your ankle, around your feet, there can be carryovers to athletic performance, day-to-day injury prevention, and just day-to-day robustness. So before I break down a few other studies, I think it's important to mention that all the studies are linked down below, and that 60% statistic is my favorite because it shows that there are benefits to be had from wearing barefoot shoes, but it doesn't try to convince us that if you're not wearing barefoot shoes all day, every day, you're doing something wrong, as some camps, forums on the internet might tell you is the case. And then on the flip side, you might have some camps on the internet that says we should be wearing cushioned, hyper inflexible, hyper rigid shoes all the time. I think there's a balance to be found, and that's what I'm hoping this video can do for you. There's some more information down there as well that dives into running barefoot a little bit more as it explores the evolutionary history of running and how footwear has changed the way that we move and how there might be a direct link between that and the commonality of running related injuries in the modern world. If you watched one of my more recent videos, this one just here, running for those of you that are over 200 pounds, a hack that I have found very effective to improve running cadence and gait is trying to run in a pair of barefoot shoes, and you'll very quickly find that if you're overstriding with your gait normally, it'll feel so horrible on your heel when doing so. It will force you to run a little bit tighter and develop a bit more of an efficient stride. whereas cushioned conventional shoes can allow you to get away with overstriding, which might be one of the causes for the commonality of running injuries. And finally, if you are a parent or aspiring to be one and you are watching, then there is some research linked down below that breaks down the potential benefits of kids wearing more wide, thin and flexible shoes for their overall development. So definitely food for thought at the very least. If you were astute enough to note that the light behind me went off quite some time ago, gold star for you, because we in fact didn't, and only just have, and I've only just now fixed it. So I don't feel an apology is in order, but I thought I'd just acknowledge it for the sake of standards, you know. So another big question is, Fergus, which shoes do you use? What do you use them for? And do you recommend them? So why don't we break that down? So I'm going to break these down into 4 categories, starting with gym, moving into casual, then moving into multifunctional, and then boots. So first up, we have the most popular shoe available on Vivo's website, and that is the Primus Lite. This is in fact a collaboration with Finisterre, which is cool, but also very out of focus, so you'll just have to take my word for it. But these are wide, toe box, thin, and flexible, which means that there's zero, well, almost zero interference between your foot and the floor. So these are great for a gym environment, gives you a really stable, solid base, allows you to screw in for really, really tight, rigid strength work, and just gives you that introduction into the brand, into barefoot shoes that allows you to feel how they work. So recommendation here, if you get yourself a pair of these, is just put them in your gym bag, wear them around the gym, see how things feel, see if you feel the benefits, and then from there you can build up your volume in other shoes. In the same category, we actually have a brand new pair that we will unbox live on camera. Don't say I'm not good to you around here, but these are the Primus Lite knits and are essentially a softer version of the Primus Lites. So again, a fantastic gym shoe, a fantastic day-to-day shoe, available in black and white. I would hazard a guess, haven't even put them on yet, that these would be more comfortable because I love the knit versions of the shoes that Vivo have produced in the past. So great entry point, great starting point, same application as the previous, and like with the previous, wide toe box, thin and flexible. Before I crack on as well, it's probably worth mentioning that the premise of the brand is exactly that. So in terms of the sole, the differences to consider are the grip and the style. That's pretty much the only differences between the shoe, because some will have more aggressive grip, some will be very flat, some will have firm ground soles, some will have soft ground soles. But other than that, they are all wide toe box, they are all thin, and they are all flexible. So in terms of which shoes are best for which activities, it's largely up to you to determine what you need for that activity. So moving on to the casual category, we have the Geo Court knits to kick things off. And as I said earlier, the knitted versions from Vivo are generally softer and more comfortable, in my opinion. And these are a knitted version of the Geo Courts, which are a fantastic day-to-day casual shoe. I've been wearing these pretty much all day, every day with jeans throughout 2022, so they've seen better days. I'm not quite sure if the lighting is doing justice to just how shoddy these are in terms of condition, and I've definitely given them the run around this year, but the heels held out really well on both of them, and I think actually that's the angle where you can see just how wide they are in the toe box best. So good option with jeans, means that you don't need to compromise on the benefits of barefoot shoes whilst looking like a bit of a goon, as that's an important thing to consider in the modern world, I think. So great with jeans. You can wear them with joggers, etc. as well, but I've just found these very comfortable. And pro tip, I have taken the insoles out of these ones as well, which means there's even less sort of cushioning protection between my feet and the floor, which means that I feel truly, truly barefoot when walking to and from the office, which is nice. Then going down a slightly different angle, we have the Scott boots, which are, again, worn regularly with jeans by myself, potentially by others. And they give you all of the benefits of having a sort of casual boot with the wide, thin, flexible options of being in Vivos. So these are available in a few colors. They're quite seasonal as well, so when they're there and you like them, probably worth grabbing them. But again, great for day-to-day wear, really comfortable, and doesn't have any of the restrictive tendencies that boots can have. I've got a pair from Russell & Bromley that feel really tight and narrow at the end, and I'm always so happy to get out of them whenever I've been wearing them at more formal events, but I don't have that effect with these, so something to consider. So moving on to the multifunctional options, we have the Primus Trail Firm Ground, which are my supermarket dog walk, Sunday stroll for some coffee shoes, as they have a little bit more in the sole, which means that you've got more grip, you've got a little bit more cushioning, which means they're more comfortable on concrete, but they're very easy to slip on, they're very comfortable. Again, a knitted version of the Primus Trail FG, which means they're very comfortable, and these are probably one of my favorite iterations that Vivo provide, just because they give me so many options. I've worn these up Ben Nevis, I've worn these down the shops, I've worn these around the block, and I've worn them whilst I've done some running on concrete. They're very multifunctional, and if I was to recommend one shoe for anyone to get started in, it would probably be these, because you can wear them to the gym, you can wear them walking the dog, you can wear them to and from the office, but they do give you that little bit more in the sole and with the insole as well. That means it doesn't feel quite as harsh a transition from normal shoes from the off. Then we have a similar shoe with an upgraded sole in the form of the Tracker Decon Low, which I probably could have put through the washing machine for this, but you know what, let's keep it authentic. I last wore these up the Pentlands and had a great time doing so. So these again, knitted, very comfortable, and really, really multifunctional. You can wear them walking around. I know a lot of people are wearing these in the gym at the moment. They're pretty culty over in America actually as a gym shoe, which is exciting. But they do have the upgraded firm ground sole. So if we compare side by side, you can see that the lugs on these are a bit more aggressive than the flatter sort of fidget spinner shaped lugs on here. So grip wise, these I've found so far to be fantastic. These aren't bad in any way, but I definitely have noticed a difference in the updated firm ground sole, where I wouldn't wear these in muddy environments, for example, where I feel like I get away with wearing these in muddy environments. So similar shoe in terms of application, different look, different style, and different sole in terms of grip. Next up, we have the most controversial category, and that is boots. And why is it controversial? Because there'll probably be some of you watching that are thinking, but I need ankle support in my hiking and hill walking boots. And my counter argument to that would be, if we refer back to the study from earlier, where wearing Vivos on a regular basis can increase your foot strength, ankle strength by a significant amount, you will be much better off in doing so, which means that you might not need to rely on ankle support and can therefore feel the freedom of movement, the benefits, the agility, the proprioception that comes from wearing a pair of barefoot shoes in the hills on hill walks. So let's focus on these boots here, which are the Tracker Forest ESCs. ESC referring to the extreme sole on the bottom, which is very aggressive, great grip. And excitingly, Johnny and I, Johnny who's been on this channel several times, and is my coach of 5 years, were part of the wear testing process for these in 2020 as part of Project Vertical. So these are actually a canvas prototype version. My leather pair is upstairs in the attic, worn out and beaten up, and I couldn't find them. So the pairs available online are made with leather, but are a really good lightweight, open, breathable, comfortable boot that if you can get used to wearing barefoot shoes in the hills, I'm confident you will really enjoy doing so, because you feel so much more connected to the ground, you feel much lighter, much more nimble, and you get much more proprioceptive feedback, which I think enhances the experience. These are probably my favorite boots from Vivo, bit of sentimental value attached, but I think these look good, and I wear these over the winter with jeans quite frequently as well. We then have the Tracker Decon, which is a version of their most popular hiking boot, the OG Tracker. I'm calling it the OG, it's not actually labeled that on the website. And this is a lightweight knitted version of the Tracker, which means they're very, very comfortable, very flexible, and have great grip. So as a summer boot, as a lightweight winter boot, dog walking boot, fantastic. And I think they look great in certain settings as well. So lots of things to consider and lots of options that I've broken down for you, but those are ultimately the shoes that I use on a regular basis. And hopefully I've made it clear what I use each of them for. So I'm of the opinion that everybody should try some barefoot shoes, and I'm even further of the opinion that they should be Vivos. And that isn't just because I obviously have a fantastic relationship with them, those are my brand of choice, but I think they give you the widest entry point, and as I've already mentioned, you can save yourself 10% off with this video. So my recommendation, if you have the means to do so, is to choose a pair that you can assign to a specific activity and then give it a couple of weeks, months of using it for that activity to determine whether they are for you. That could be the gym, so they stay in your gym bag and you put them on whenever you're in the gym. It could be for dog walks at the front end and back end of the day. It could be for your Sunday walking to get a coffee and cake. It could be for your leisurely hill walk on a Saturday afternoon. It could be for your podcast walk every morning. It could be for whatever you see fit, but I think giving them a go and walking in them on a regular basis to get a feeling for what you get from them, alongside reaping the rewards of trying to strengthen your feet and the structure around your ankle a little bit more, is a very beneficial thing to do. They might not be for you, but they very much might be. I was skeptical at first, but I am now very much committed to the point where I will wear them for about 90% of the time. For total transparency, I will pretty much wear nothing but Vivos on a day-to-day basis. I will run in cushioned shoes for fatigue reasons and because some of them have carbon plates in them. Any free performance benefits I'm going to take. Most of my long distance running I do in Ultras, which are zero drop but do have a bit of cushioning, which makes me feel like I can go for longer because my feet aren't working quite as hard. And then I have some formal shoes, I have some kilt shoes, and I have some dress sneakers, for want of a better phrase. But Monday to Friday, most of the time you will catch me in Vivos in one form or another, and I feel much more robust, much more stable, much more balanced, and much more aware of how I move as a result of it. But I did start by just wearing them in and around the office. I then started wearing them to and from the gym, and 3 years later, here I am wearing them pretty much all day, every day, other than when I'm using specific things for specific activities. And for my final point today, I just want to be crystal clear that transitioning to a more barefoot shoe style does come with some things to consider, as I mentioned earlier on. And that is a increased range of motion through your Achilles and calf, and a higher demand on the muscles and ligaments in your feet, a more sensory feedback through your feet, and a different alignment through your knees and hips in terms of movement, which might mean that your gait changes slightly. So it's important to really steadily build up your step count in them. Don't be walking 15,000 steps a day in conventional footwear and then straight switch for Vivos, because it might be too much too soon. Start with a couple of thousand steps a day for a couple of weeks, build that up to 5 to 10,000 for a couple of weeks. Then you can wear them all day, every day, and see how you respond, any tension in your calves, any tension in your Achilles, and be conscious of that. And when it comes to running, I'd really encourage people to very, very steadily start slow. I'm not a huge advocate for barefoot running. I think it's great to reinforce technique. I wear them in the trail because I love the feeling of agility and proprioception from the floor, but I don't do much road running on concrete in them, just for the sake of fatigue management. But I'm not wanting the suggestion here to be today completely convert to barefoot shoes, wear them for everything, because that does come with inherent risk. So if you'd like to start running in them, then make sure you get a good chunk of time committed just walking in them for a while, and then really steadily build your volume up in them, and be conscious of how your Achilles, your calves, your hips, and your knees are responding. But most people, anecdotally speaking, that have worn them for a long period of time or run them quite frequently, find that in the long run, their knees, hips, feet, ankles feel much better. But it's important not to make the mistake that a lot of people have done previously, especially when Born to Run was published, hashtag class action lawsuit, is to go too fast, too far, too soon. So I don't want to see any comments from people saying, I've got a pair of barefoot shoes and I really hurt my calves, I hate you, Fergus, because I'll probably just say you should have watched the whole video. But hopefully that's been conclusive. Hopefully I've covered all of the points that you were hoping that I would, and hopefully I've given you a bit of an understanding of how to approach potentially purchasing a pair or getting another pair, or what pairs can be used for what things, or where they might fit into your day-to-day life. That's pretty much it from me today. Just a quick reminder to hit like down below, comment with your thoughts, feelings, questions, suggestions, insights, anecdotes, or anything else that you would like to discuss. And if you do wear 5-finger glove shoes, I am sorry, as I'm sure at this point that I have rather profoundly offended you, but beyond that, please make sure that everybody has hit the subscribe button, as it would make me very, very pleased like this. Thank you. See you next time.